Touya, an ugly average Joe, turns his life upside down when he somehow scores a popular idol Yuki. However, things start to get rough for him when Yuki's manager tries to keep him away from her by giving him a taste of her own body. Amidst all the other baddies wanting to let him clap them, Touya tries his best to stay loyal to his loaded idol girlfriend. However, before any of this, Touya is just a low-level NEET who's enjoying simping over Yuki's interview when he notices that it is already afternoon. After leaving the house, he calls his side chicks from the public telephone booth and then runs into Yuki. She informs him how the old geezer wanted her to make some controversial statements, but she kept her mouth shut. Sadly, she doesn't have the time to get down to business with Touya as her manager arrives and she leaves for another shoot. Meanwhile, Touya runs into his childhood friend and the only other girl who gives him the time of the day, Misaki. While Akira is busy on a call, Misaki and Touya talk about Yuki and how he hasn't been getting any action lately. With that, Misaki leaves and the two boys hang out on their own. Touya asks Akira to write his report and wonders if he can write about how he was fired from his part-time job and decides to live an honorable life as a shut-in. Just then, Haruka appears and Akira says something cheesy, making her leave, but Touya stops her and Haruka mentions that he got to see Yuki because she pulled some strings. Then she leaves and the boys talk about how Haruka lost her brother and Touya gets angry at Akira when he mentions that Haruka hasn't recovered yet. They then discuss how Haruka has moved and hasn't given Touya the address as she wants to keep thirsty stalkers away from her new place. Elsewhere, Rina finds out that a Barbie band bullied Yuki by throwing coffee on her clothes and now she doesn't have anything else to wear. On the other hand, Touya and Akira are slacking off at the new part-time job and he notices Yuki's management agency's director, IG, leaving the place. Akira tells him that they are free to go home, but Touya refuses as he didn't serve enough hotties. Realizing that he is low on bread, Touya calls his father to ask for some money for university fees, but he hangs up on him. Back at home, Touya is watching the idol show while using his cheap cup noodles when he gets a call from Yuki. She tells him that the current airing show is a recording of last week and that the show next week would be even more interesting. He then informs her about the minimum wage job he got. Nonetheless, she is forced to cut the homey conversation short as Rina appears. Rina asks Yuki if she was talking to her boyfriend and asks the manager to give them some time when she asks Yuki to talk to the president. Meanwhile, Haruka pays Touya a visit and the two of them go outside to have a talk. At the same time, Yuki visits the house of Gojo's father who needs to discuss an important matter. Haruka gives Touya a treat like the dog he is while he asks Haruka the reason she helped him meet Yuki, to which she replies that all she did was pray for his pathetic life. The two of them then sit together to chill out for a bit. Rina returns home and goes to her brother's room where she sees Yuki crying. She wonders if IG made her play 7 minutes in heaven, but in reality, Yuki was crying with happiness. The next day, Touya is at work when Akira pays him a visit and brings some cheesecake for the brokey. Touya then tells Akira's grandfather the story of when he sneaked into the women's changing room to gaze at some peaches. The two of them continue to talk about how wonderful those peaches were until Yuki and Rina pay a visit to their cafe, looking like prime suspects of a crime. They then get to eat the cheesecake that Akira bought for Touya and the boys gaslight Rina into thinking that it was specially made for her. Sadly, the hot manager comes to pick Yuki up. After she leaves, Touya talks to Rina about the book that Misaki gave him, and his awkward lady-repelling conversation style makes Akira crack up. Rina then asks for the loser's phone number and the desperate fellow instantly gives it to her. Just then, IG visits the cafe and agrees to give Rina a ride to her studio as the fatty manager was busy eating donuts and was running late. Soon after, the manager arrives, only to find out that Rina has already left with her brother. At night, Touya calls Misaki from the telephone booth to thank her for the magazine she lent him and notices her coughing. She mentions that it is just a slight fever and nothing to be worried about. He then talks about how wonderful all the things were in the book and asks her if he can keep it for a little longer. She agrees and tries to ask him a favor as well, but the coughs get in the way once again. Nonetheless, after talking to her, he returns home and finds a box full of food from his father but ends up returning it. Then, he hears the phone ringing and runs back to his house, only to realize that it's a call from Rina. Touya is surprised to hear the goddess's voice on the telephone he bought from the granny's garage sale and gets to know that it was Rina who asked Yuki to show her the place he works at. Just then, Haruka visits his house and informs him about the students having to re-register for their courses and that the deadline is on Saturday. After the conversation, he runs back to the phone, only to find out that Rina can't talk anymore. However, she does offer him a part-time job as her manager and mentions that Yuki will be on the same show as her tomorrow. He is delighted to get to work with a hottie when Yuki calls him, and he keeps the fact about his conversation with Rina a secret. She informs Touya about her upcoming day off and suggests watching films together, but he gets interrupted by Haruka, who rings the bell once again, telling him to bring a seal for registration, and he tells Haruka to register the courses for him. With that being said, he is free to hang out with Yuki on Saturday. The next day, he visits the Agata management agency where he sees the whale running away. IG appears and informs Touya that he was fired. Touya wonders if the fatty was fired because of him, but IG replies that it was his decision as the president of the agency. Rina then appears and calls Touya to the room where Yuki is present as well. Later, the auditions are going on and IG talks to Yuki's manager about how she might not be able to hold on to the gig for long. Following that, Rina notices Yuki and Touya waving at each other, which pisses her off, and she slaps the shit out of him. Later, she makes a scene in her room while Yuki tells Touya that Rina was just acting and created time for them to hang out with each other. Yuki then gives him a hug and Touya remembers the time they spent together. He asks her about the secret she is supposed to tell him, but finds out that she will tell it to him on Saturday. The next day, Yuki tells Touya that she won't be able to hang out on Saturday as IG wants to meet up with her behind closed doors. Following that, he pathetically goes to his father and begs him to pay the university fees as he was fired from his jobs, but all he gets is the food he returned the other day. After that, Touya gets to know that a certain girl wants to be tutored by him and her family is willing to pay him double the amount. Overwhelmed with happiness, Touya visits the girl's house, but no one opens the door. Having no other choice, he returns to the cafe he used to work at. Surprisingly, Rina appears and confronts IG, who is also present, about firing Touya without her permission. IG then tells Touya to have a private talk with him, and Rina reassures Touya that she will fix everything. Touya gets a call from Rina on behalf of Yuki, asking if he still wants to hang out on Saturday. Touya ends up asking her to meet up at 10 and returns to his wet dreams. Later, Yuki informs Touya that Rina forced her own lesson time in Yuki's slot, giving her some free time. Touya then arrives at the meetup spot where he runs into a schoolgirl who thinks of Touya as a creep. Touya manages to quiet her down and brags about how he will be hanging out with an idol, making the girl laugh and calling him a delusional loner. He keeps on waiting for Yuki until it's way after the time they were supposed to meet. Rina, who was planning to stalk them, also gets bored and leaves. Eventually, Yuki arrives, but Touya is already on the bus with the schoolgirl, planning to rizz her up. He tries asking for her name, but the girl ignores his shitty pickup lines, telling him to stay away from her. The girl then makes fun of Touya for gaslighting her into believing that his blob-looking face was able to score Yuki. Eventually, they arrive at the other bus stop where the girl takes her school bus and leaves. Meanwhile, Touya starts remembering his school days when he used to hang out with Yuki and suddenly remembers that he needs to meet up with her. Both of them try to call each other's house and office, but nothing works out, and in the end, the date plan gets cancelled. On the other hand, Rina pays a visit to her brother and tries to buy time for Yuki. In the end, she succeeds and Yuki's manager calls Yuki and tells her that the lesson is cancelled. Luckily, Touya runs into Yuki and she hugs him, letting him know that the agency is letting her release her first ever single song. Apparently, this was the lame secret that she was hyping him up for and was scared that she wouldn't be able to tell him if the date was cancelled. As it's pretty late, Touya asks her to visit his apartment and remembers how his father kicked him out of the house for collecting questionable body pillows. Yuki decides not to stay with a closet creep like him and asks Touya to walk her home. On their way to Yuki's house, she mentions how he was late because of trying to score a middle school girl, and wonders if Rina's plan to buy her sometime worked. Eventually, they arrive at Yuki's place that looks far better than Touya's dump yard, and he tells her about the time he first met Haruka. Just when he is about to leave, Yuki mentions that she wants to get closer to him and wishes to feel his disgusting-looking body. These simple words make him climax and he ends up kissing Yuki. Later, he finds himself in her apartment, contemplating whether to peek while she showers. Following that, Touya also takes a shower at her place and comes out to find her sleeping on the bed. He struggles to stop himself from creating the scene from Snow White and ends up leaving only to find her manager Yaoi at the doorstep. He lets her know that he didn't get inside her plot even though he wanted to. She somehow believes him and offers to give Touya a ride back home. However, she suddenly changes the route, making him think that he might get lucky. Yaoi then informs Touya about the time when Rina became an idol and was framed by the producer who made a cameraman leak her photos. She was her manager at that time and was fired instantly, and it was later revealed that the producer had embezzled quite a sum of money. but his intentions behind framing Rina are still unknown and the case was closed without reaching a conclusion. As a result, Rina was forced to change her behavior and made sure to never show any weaknesses. Yayoi further mentions that she still regrets not being able to protect Rina, and is not confident that a sloppy chick like her can protect Yuki if that were to happen again. He then figures that she might be telling him to stay away from Yuki and is talking about his part-time job. Following that, Touya finds out that IG was the one who set up a meeting with Yuki all alone on set and questions if he wanted to get freaky with Yuki, but Yayoi replies that it was for her vocal lessons. In the end, she asks Touya to stay away from Yuki and puts his hand on her jugs to threaten him. She then drops him home and later that day, comes to pick Touya up for another meeting. Yayoi tells Touya that Yuki was sad that she slept that night and didn't get the chance to see his meat. Following that, Yayoi and Touya enjoy a meal together and on their way back, she hops on his lap, asking Touya to make her Yuki's replacement and kissing him in front of the underpaid taxi driver. He feels himself getting bricked and instantly leaves the taxi to return to his apartment. There, he gets a call from Rina who wants to meet up and discuss something, but Touya ends up making an excuse. Yuki then calls Touya, but he ignores her call and focuses on the manuscript that Misaki sent him. The next morning, the drama club member, Tamaru, checks out Misaki's manuscript and decides to accept it. Meanwhile, Touya meets up with Akira as he couldn't find Misaki even though he was supposed to meet her. The two of them end up hanging out and Haruka appears, inviting him to hang out, but he refuses. On the other hand, everyone likes Misaki's script and Tamaru makes Misaki in charge of the props and costume and forces her to do it even when she tries to refuse. Later that day, Yuki meets up with Haruka and gives her a message to convey to Touya. She then visits Touya's house, telling him that Yuki will be waiting for his call, but Touya is still unsure what is the right thing to do and remembers all the events that happened these past days. Just then, he gets a call from Misaki, asking him to help her out as the slacker from his club is clapping her. Later, Touya is taking a walk, thinking about his call with Mizuki where he suggested the two of them working together to help her make the deadline of costume rehearsals. They also talked about how he will be able to give some feedback on the script she sent, and she apologized for not meeting up with him because of the meeting with her club members. Eventually, he arrives at Yuki's apartment but doesn't have the guts to go inside and ends up returning. The next morning, he informs about Misaki's situation to Akira, who says that she is just acting strong so her friends don't worry about her. Touya questions him for not helping Misaki, but he had some reservations as well. This reminds Touya that he only met Yuki once last year. Akari then mentions how Tamaru didn't let Misaki quit the club and forcefully made her a ghost member, all to take advantage of her. He then asks Akira to help them out, but he already has some plans, which is why he is unable to. Meanwhile, Yuki is doing her first audition of her new disastrous single. At night, Yayoi visits the cafe Touya works only to tell him that she will be waiting for him in her car. After his shift ends, Touya enters her car and Yayoi once again throws herself at Touya, but he pushes her aside and leaves the car. Outside his apartment, he finds Misaki waiting for him and he invites her inside. Misaki makes sure that her face that's keeping her single looks good while Touya is out. Soon after, he returns and finds Misaki sleeping on his bed. Nonetheless, he starts reviewing the costume designs she drew but gets interrupted by a call from Yuki. She apologizes for sleeping on him that day and informs him about the new single she has started to work on. After the call, Yuki reassures IG that she only called Touya to make sure he wasn't busy being a loli and wasn't slacking off. The next morning, Touya wakes up and finds that Misaki has already left. On the campus, he runs into her and the two of them decide to go and grab the material for the costumes. The two of them spend the whole day together and she accidentally trips, making Touya grab him, which reminds her of the dark times with Tamaru. The schoolgirl catches him with Misaki and wonders if that is Yuki. Meanwhile, IG doesn't seem to be satisfied with Yuki's low-grade singing skills when suddenly Rina pays her a visit. Touya continues to hang out with Misaki while the little girls stalk them. The two of them then visit the sewing club to ask for a sewing machine, but they refuse as the club is busy making some spicy cosplay costumes. The schoolgirl, or some might say, Mana, returns home and throws away her mother's cooking, only to eat McDonald's like a true weeb. Meanwhile, Yuki continues to work at the studio and IG finally likes her recording. Afterward, IG asks Rina for her to change to quickly and she replies that she agreed to give her Touya's used boxers. On the other hand, Yayoi asks the same question to Yuki and she replies that Yuki promised to buy her cheesecake if she does well. At the same time, Rina gives IG an idea about the next show that IG likes so much that he starts laughing like a maniac. Misaki ends up staying at Touya's father's house and pays respect to his former mother. His dad then wonders how a beauty like her is hanging out with an unemployed NEET like Touya. As they speak of the NEET, Touya appears and informs her about the room she can sleep in. His dad then informs her about where she can find the sewing machine and advises Misaki to call for him if Touya tries recreating his fantasy. The next morning, Touya goes to the house where he is supposed to teach and finds out that his student is none other than Mana herself. Eventually, she lets him inside only for Touya to find out that the two of them are alone in the house. He calms down his intrusive thoughts and begs her to let him be her tutor. Soon after, he begins tutoring her but gets to know that Mana doesn't plan to study and doesn't even want to attend college. He tries to motivate her by telling Mana his disastrous life journey, but she couldn't care less. Nonetheless, the study session begins and Mana studies while Touya sits there like Sakura's figurine that no one wants to buy. Mana then starts talking about Yuki and how she saw the two of them hanging out the other day. Touya begins laughing and tells her that it was actually Misaki, making Mana think of him as a creep. The two of them then start to discuss the idol she often listens to, and she begins mocking Touya for having weird delusions of dating an idol like Yuki. He then notices that all the answers she wrote are correct and later meets up with Misaki. Later, Rina finds Touya eating dinner with Misaki and takes him to a secret underground at the cafe. This makes Misaki disappointed and she ends up leaving. Meanwhile, Touya meets up with IG in that secret room and Rina mentions how Touya has been getting in the pants of other girls, being unfaithful to Yuki. She further pressures IG to make Touya her manager, but apparently, he already has found one for her. IG then reveals that her older sister has been keeping tabs on Yuki while he is being monitored by the hot and bothered manager. They then decide to continue the conversation sometime later and find out that Misaki has already left. On their way back, Touya tries calling Misaki but she doesn't answer the call. Yuki meets up with another idol group and they make sure to remind Yuki her place in the industry. The AOA tries to confront them but Yuki, being a coward, stops her. Elsewhere, Haruka visits Touya's apartment and starts having a breakdown when he doesn't open the door. Turns out, Touya is at the studio where Rina is giving auditions. After listening to Rina's voice, IG makes Touya listen to the unpleasant sounds Yuki made the other day, which disappoints him. He is unsure whether it was bad or good and tells Rina about how people are telling that it's better for a germ like him to stay away from her. Haruka gets cornered by a bunch of thugs but Mana appears in the nick of time and calls out for help. The thugs make sure to get a feel before running away. Rina tells Touya about the time when her brother used to be an idol and got tired of himself after he couldn't change, which is why he put Rina on display and enjoyed the time until she could change and develop her talent, only to throw her aside afterward. But now that Creep has found Yuki and is interested in her because of the potential she has, Rina then advises Touya to believe in her and tells him to not look at Rina as a goddess, as she can quickly become a succubus as well. In the end, after handing over her schedule, she walks away. Meanwhile, Mana discusses her older brother with Haruka and tells Touya's miserable life story. Haruka realizes who she is talking about and Mana advises her to wait for him and mentions how she sees him as her boyfriend instead of a brother. Because Haruka can clear the misunderstanding, she leaves. Back at home, Touya is helping Misaki with the costumes and lets her know about Rina, the one she saw at the cafe. The next morning, Touya returns home and notices Haruka sleeping on his bed. He makes sure to hide all the X-rated magazines and return to his dad's place, but Haruka decides to tag along. As the days pass, Touya continues to help Misaki and misses all of Yuki's calls. One day, she calls his dad's place and Misaki picks up the call, telling Yuki that she'll let Touya know. At night, Touya is out with Haruka to get Yuki a gift for her upcoming birthday, and remembers when she told him that her birthday is on the day of Christmas. This time, Mana follows him again, wondering if the girl next to him is Yuki. On Christmas Day, Yuki runs into Touya at the agency because Rina was the one who invited him. All the others decide to leave the lovebirds alone and they sit awkwardly for a while as if she saw his search history. Luckily, she breaks the ice by suggesting a date on the day of the university festival. Later, Yuki continues to record her new single while Yaoi decides to punish Touya for visiting Yuki by smooching his dry lips. After finishing up with the costumes, Touya loads them up in Misaki's van that kidnappers use. After that, she takes the costumes to Tamaru but he decides not to use them, saying that the childish things she made won't cut it. On the other hand, Touya falls asleep while tutoring Mana and she almost builds the courage to kiss him but fails at the last moment. At night, Misaki is supposed to design new costumes and Touya's father decides to help them out. Eventually, it is the day of the festival and Yuki is present on the stage while Mana meets up with Haruka. At home, Touya wakes up and finds that Misaki has already left. Following that, Touya arrives at the campus and runs into Akira, who is dressed up as a failed pastor. He then hears some boys talking about Yuki's buns but gets surrounded by their fans soon after. After seeing the drama club practicing, he calls Misaki and finds out that she didn't go to watch the rehearsal as sleeping with her Levi body pillow was more important. Nonetheless, she asks him to watch the play tomorrow and wants to thank the geezer for all the help he provided. Yuki tries calling Touya from her agency but he is present outside her apartment. He tries to call her out but backs out in the end. The next day, Misaki asks for 2 extra seats in the audience for Touya but Tamaru refuses. She mentions that it was all thanks to the loser and the old fart, but Tamaru couldn't care less and tells Touya to buy the ticket, which pisses her off, and she leaves. With that being said, he suggests buying the tickets but Misaki doesn't want him to as she knows the nerd won't give him 2 tickets. Having no other choice, she suggests watching the show from a secret location and takes him to a rather suspicious place. After reaching the spot, Misaki notices that the prologue is going on and they decide to chill out and eat some Kinder Joy till the main show happens. The 2 of them then start reminiscing about the past and he tells Misaki that the midget boy Akira might be in love with her but she refuses to talk about this at the moment. She then tries to watch the play from the window but falls to the ground. This makes her panic and Misaki starts giving hints about her being in love with Touya, and in order to calm her down, he gives her a kiss. After the kiss, she starts confessing to the fact that all she did was use him to get her play on the stage, and when Touya tries confessing his love, she tells him to leave. Just then, Akira appears in front of Misaki and confesses his love but she faints and is taken to an ambulance. At the hospital, the mad scientist tells Akira that Misaki has just accumulated a lot of fatigue and will be perfectly okay after a good night's sleep. The next morning, Akira is still waiting for her and soon after, she gets out of her room and is ready to go. Elsewhere, the prehistoric dude starts feeling lightheaded and breaks the picture frame of his wife. After exiting the hospital, Misaki isn't in the mood to go home and suggests the 2 of them go buy some lingerie. Yuki is getting a bit anxious as the day she performs comes closer and Yaoi tries to calm her nerves down. Meanwhile, Rina is arguing with his brother as the day the show was supposed to was changed and now they will be having the show at a back alley spot with a lower attendance capacity. He then wonders if Rina wants to switch places with the place Yuki is performing but she refuses and warns her buzz-cut brother to not destroy Touya's chick. Yuki asks Yaoi to give a letter to Touya as she doesn't want to hear his unpleasant voice until the concert happens. Meanwhile, Touya is present at the university cafeteria and hears some people talking about rumors of Misaki being trapped by Tamaru in the storage room and being taken to the hospital. Just then, Tamaru appears, gives Touya the nastiest look and leaves. Haruka also pays Touya a visit and wants to talk to him about Mana. Rina also tells her brother to add Touya to her team or she won't perform. Later, she visits Touya at the university and takes him to the cafe where he finds Misaki and makes sure she is doing okay but soon realizes he's being a third wheel and leaves. Touya then goes to the secret room and reassures Rina that all her die-hard simps will surely attend the concert as breathing the same air as her would be enough for them. He then suggests making Yuki, who is a rookie, swap places with her but she refuses and tells Touya that as her manager, all he has to do is stay by her side. Eventually, Rina announces that her upcoming concert won't be free and will take place in a shady back alley. After that, she runs into the Barbie band who tries to rile her up but she couldn't care less. Touya comes running and tells Rina that they need to go. Inside the car, Rina mentions that giving him that many holidays for the other jobs might be tough, and he decides to leave them. Following that, she asks Ig how she can win against the band that is literally performing in the arena. And just then Yuki appears. Rina agrees to practice with her and notices a number on the mirror. Rina then watches Yuki dance but can't bear a second of that pathetic performance and leaves. There, she notices the letter Yuki wrote to Touya in the bin. Elsewhere, Touya is busy locking lips with the baddie manager while Rina tries fixing the letter, but realizes it's too late. The next day, Ig explains the basics of earning money from a show to the girls and mentions that it's better for them that the size of the venue is smaller. He further mentions that even if the idol group were to sell out the whole arena, there is a chance to win if both the venues the girls are performing sell out as well. After the meeting, Rina confronts Yaoi for throwing away Yuki's letter and she replies that all she is doing is removing all the obstacles to the concert. Furthermore, Yaoi says that Rina is allowed to tell Yuki whatever she wishes, but Rina replies that Yuki needs her vixen manager and walks away. Touya asks the owner of the cafe to pass the book to Misaki and then check out the stadium where the girls will be performing along with Rina. After that, he goes to the studio where Rina practices her song over and over again. After she's done, Rina invites him to dinner where Touya complains about how Yuki isn't giving him the time of the day. but Rina reassures him that Yuki has better things to do than to talk to a loser. On the other hand, Yuki asks Yaoi if she delivered the letter and she shamelessly agrees. The next day, Touya is tutoring Mana and she mentions that he might not be able to attend Yuki's concert, but he is disappointed about how Yuki didn't even inform him about it. She then tells Touya to leave as she needs to go cycling with Haruka. At the university, Akira runs into Misaki and offers to help her, but she doesn't want to be seen with a midget like him. After she is done with her work, Akira comes to pick her up and on their way out, they run into Touya. Elsewhere, Haruka is hanging out with Mana, who mentions how Haruka sees Touya as her boyfriend but she disagrees. Haruka then finds out that the brother Mana keeps talking about is Touya. Mana continues to advise her not to go out with a cherry boy like Touya, and in the end, Haruka formally introduces herself to Mana. At night, Touya is out with Yaoi and tells her that all he does is hang around Yuki and keeps on complimenting her, which Yaoi finds to be pretty weird. After stopping at their usual spot, Touya starts taking all the things off his chest and mentions the fact that Yuki's isn't talking to him while bawling. This results in Yaoi licking his face and giving him a kiss. He then wakes up in her car and the daily routine continues. Yuki calls Rina and asks if Touya said anything and she refuses. After work, Rina invites Touya to have dinner with her tomorrow, but he refuses as he has plans with the sadistic manager. Rina tells Touya that he cannot fall for the vixen as she can also give him a ride if he wants. She further questions how he will tell Yuki about it, but he plans to keep it a secret. Seeing how the simp is all over the manager, Rina suggests they go on a date to stop him, but he refuses. After finishing work, he asks Yaoi for a ride back home and invites her inside to finally fulfill his fantasy of doing it with an older woman. The next day, Rina runs away from Touya at the stadium and tries her best to stay away. But he visits her in the dressing room where Rina reads him the whole letter Yuki wrote, which includes her wanting Touya to come and see him perform along with all the things she has been feeling while preparing for the concert. This makes Touya tear up and Rina fires him on the spot. Touya then tries calling Yuki, but she doesn't pick up. Later that day, Yuki hears a voicemail from Touya where he promises to attend her concert no matter what happens. After listening to the voicemail, Yuki wants to call him back but somehow stops herself. Meanwhile, Touya tries booking a ticket but finds out that all of them are sold out. The next day, he mentions this to Mana, who says that Yuki would have sent him a ticket if she really was his girlfriend. Following that, Mana goes cycling with Haruka and tells her Touya's situation, making Haruka call Yuki an idiot. That night, Misaki calls Touya to tell him that she has been doing well, and that he would like to visit the geezer's place to thank him. Touya mentions that he doesn't have a ticket to Yuki's concert, and advises Misaki to go with the Smurf instead. At the same time, Mana asks her mother for a favor, who is the president of the agency. The next day, she gives Touya a ticket to Yuki's concert, saying that she got it through connections. Akira tells Misaki that he won't be going to the concert, and she decides not to go as well. Touya returns home and finds a letter from Misaki along with her ticket. The next day, Misaki is hanging out with Akira when Tamaru appears out of nowhere and stabs Misaki, but she gets saved by the book that Touya gave her. On the other hand, Touya asks for his father to give him a ride to her concert but gets rejected. He then returns to Yaoi's car where she once again forces herself on him. Following that, he arrives at the venue where Yuki will be performing. Soon after, the concert is about to start and Ig pushes Yuki onto the stage. She begins singing, which makes Touya stunned. She continues to sing while the crowd cheers her on. At the same time, the girls' band and Rina also perform. Touya remembers all the past memories with Yuki, and after the concert, she hugs Yaoi in relief. After finishing the concert, Rina runs to the other venue to perform another show there. Yaoi runs into Touya at the venue and tells him that Yuki wants to see him. He then visits Yuki, who complains how nobody other than him came to see her even when she sent them tickets for free. However, their meeting is cut short as Yuki already has to leave and Touya sees her off. She accepts the flowers from Touya and eventually leaves. He then also leaves with Ig, and after stopping at a spot, Ig mentions how they won the Battle of Bread. Furthermore, he tells Touya that Yuki has charmed the gods of song with her singing and asks what he felt after seeing her performance. According to Ig, what he and the others felt was that Yuki was made to sing and will lose her life if she stops singing. He then asks Touya about his next step, but before he can reply, his ride arrives. Elsewhere, Misaki and Akira are also hanging out and he tells her not to be so reserved with him. Both of them then notice the snow and decide to head back. After reaching home, Yaoi tries kissing Touya but he stops her and gets out. He finds Mana outside his apartment. She makes up excuses for how she accidentally came across his apartment and then tries to leave. But the Riz Lord stops her and invites her to come inside as it's snowing. Soon after, Yaoi comes to return something and notices that Mana has a fever, making her decide to drop her home. Haruka then visits his apartment, inviting him to hang out, but he refuses. She holds back her tears and leaves, making Touya go after her, but ends up being a bit too late. He eventually finds her in the park, where Haruka questions him about the fact that Mana was at his apartment. Before he can reply, Akari pulls up in his car, telling him about his father's critical condition. The series concludes with Yuki trying to call Touya but failing to get a reply. This was all about the lovebirds. Do you think Touya's father finally kicked the bucket? Comment idle below if you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.